Very good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bastian Gigerich. I am the Director for Defense and Military Analysis at the IISS, and it is my pleasure to chair this session on new patterns of defense cooperation. I remind everybody that this is a session that is on the record in its entirety, so I'm looking forward to the discussion that we will have. We have an extraordinarily strong lineup for this session, and I'm certain the remarks and presentations that we will hear will generate a lot of interest. After the introductory statements from the speakers, we would like to enter into a dialogue with all of you, so there will be an opportunity to discuss these matters with the audience. I have therefore, in order to enable that, I have therefore asked all the speakers to do their best to limit their remarks, their initial remarks, to 3 minutes or so, so we can make sure that we have enough time for a discussion. What we want to talk about is, of course, that in the face of widening and intensifying security threats in Asia, regional states and their international partners are setting up new formats for defense cooperation in parallel with long existing arrangements that we will all be aware of. The US alliance system is long based on a hub and spoke model, has become more complex as allies strengthen their links with each other, and I think we can see some of that here at the Shangri-La Dialogue. And the US is, of course, boosting a variety of partnerships in the region. European states are displaying revived interest, and we've heard some of that in the plenary sessions this morning. And China has, of course, strengthened its own ties, including with Russia, and both of them engage in multilateral military cooperation, for example, through the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And Southeast Asian states are strengthening their links with each other and with non-Southeast Asian partners through ASEAN, the ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting and the ADMM Plus. So what we want to tackle and what we want to aim at for the session is really to assess the extent to which these various formats of exclusive and inclusive defense cooperation are compatible, where they're leading, what the future might hold in that regard, and what a variety of lessons might be that we want to hold on to. So that's the scene, and that is what we want to deal with. We will go in the order printed on the program. The Canadian Defense Minister had to pull out at the very last minute, but it leaves us still with a very strong set of 6 speakers, and I'm looking forward to hearing from them. I will now invite the Deputy Minister of Defense of Russia, Mr. Fomin, to kick us off. Mr. Fomin, please. Looking forward to hearing your remarks.
Dankeschön, my lieber Herr Bastian. First of all, allow me thanks the IISS for the invitation and the opportunity to share some perceptions of the Russian Defense Ministry in terms of addressing key security challenges in the Asia-Pacific and finding new partners of defense cooperation. I am especially grateful to the Minister of Defense of the Republic of Singapore, Nguyen Hen, for the hospitality and warm welcome. The Shangri-La Dialogue is a rightfully reputable international platform that brings together experts from many countries in order to openly exchange views on a wide scope of regional and global security issues. It's encouraging that the opportunity to talk is offered to the military, people in uniform that know all about the true value of peace and security. Discussions like these are particularly relevant today, against the backdrop of the global geopolitical landscape being reshaped. These changes occur in different ways. On the one hand, we are looking at naturally emerging new center of political, economic and military growth. Over time, this center starts feeling the need to unite for the good of the nations and states. This is exactly how Russia-India-China Association came into existence. BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Organization as well appeared in a natural way. ASEAN once followed the same path. 10 nations realized it was in their common interest to work together to develop economic cooperation and promote mutual security. Today, ASEAN is the cornerstone of security system in the Asia-Pacific, powered by coherent cooperation mechanisms with plus countries, East Asian Summit, ASEAN Regional Forum on Security, ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting plus ADMM plus. On the other hand, there is a disturbing trend when individual geopolitically oriented powers impose their approaches, dragging other countries into all sorts of joint activities for self-serving interests. So that, and a bunch of international actors, under the guise of a new regional configuration model, are seeking to promote military political blocs known as Indo-Pacific strategies. We believe the concept of a free and open Indo-Pacific to be an artificial product designed to serve individual geopolitical agenda. Presently, it may seem that the Indo-Pacific concept has a region-wide scale. It is presented as the only one possible single-option format of international engagements across the two oceans. At the same time, most of the regional countries were not even invited to discuss the new configuration parameters. The stakes are placed upon national strategies and projects instead. We consider such game plan counterproductive for the Asia-Pacific because it undermines the very concept of ASEAN centrality, or in other words, the central role of ASEAN, along with all the regional security mechanisms built around. Evidently, practicing selective cooperation, setting up groups of interest and shattering the fundamentals of multilateral engagements will never lay a solid foundation for the Asia-Pacific to prosper. All new ideas related to regional strategic arrangement should take us closer to the common space for cooperation and development, enhancement of the entire systems of ties and relations. All of this applies to the patterns of defense cooperation to be shaped. It appears that priority objectives of military-to-military cooperation in Asia-Pacific should be encompassing creation of reliable mechanisms of regional stability based on the principle of equal and indivisible security, non-alignment, equality, peaceful settlement of disputes, non-use of force or threat of force, strengthening of inclusive defense cooperation. We are confident that state-to-state relations, as well as defense cooperation in the Asia-Pacific, should rest exclusively upon the universally recognized norms of international law, most of which were constituted by those who had survived the horrific ordeal of World War II and never wished for their descendants to go through the same. We urge everyone to recall the lessons of our common history and abide by the principles of state-to-state relations embedded by our ancestors before us and effectively secured by United Nations today. Dear colleagues, speaking of approaches to defense cooperation, I would like to share some good practice of interaction between Russian Defense Ministry and Defense Agency of the Asia-Pacific, both bilateral and multilateral. Currently, we have some tangible progress in the sphere of counter-terrorism, humanitarian assistance and disaster response, military medicine, peacekeeping operations, humanitarian mine action, and maritime security. We are working closely with China, India, Vietnam, Myanmar, Laos, Indonesia, Thailand, and Cambodia. In a multilateral format, we continue our active cooperation in the ADMM Plus format. For example, together with Lao Popular Democratic Republic, Russia co-chairs the ADMM Plus Expert Working Group on humanitarian mine action. In March this year, a Russian mine action team completed the demining operation in one of the regions in Lao territory. They cleared more than 100 hectares of land destroyed over 340 explosive remnants of war, aviation munitions, and landmines. Along with the mine action operations, Russian instructors organized a training course for allow the miners to operate engineer equipment. Starting from 2020, Russia and Myanmar will be co-chairing the ADMM Plus expert working group on counter-terrorism. We are prepared to share our best practices obtained from ongoing operation in Syria. Dear colleagues, joint statement of the ADMM Plus held in October 2018 in Singapore underscored the need to maintain confidence-building measures among the defense agencies of the region. Russian Defense Ministry takes practical steps in this area by organizing annually the three major international events: Moscow Conference on International Security, Army International Military Technical Forum, and the International Army Games. In April, we held our 8th conference on international security in Moscow. The forum was attended by over 1,000 experts from 111 countries and 7 international organizations. Delegations from 55 states were headed by defense ministers, deputy ministers, and chief of general staff. This was a frank dialogue with focus on security issues in Europe, Asia, Africa, Middle East, and Latin America, as well as regional aspects of defense cooperation in peacekeeping, tackling new challenges and threats.
Minister, in the interest of time, can I ask you to conclude here? Thank you.
The Moscow Conference on International Security equally at the Shangri-La Dialogue plays an important role in finding new effective patterns of defense cooperation in order to address diverse security issues. Since 2015, Russian Defense Ministry has been hosting the annual Army International Military Technical Forum, a vast platform combining a show ground for the most state-of-the-art weapon systems and equipment and the extensive research and business-oriented program called to attract representatives of science expert community to discuss the problems and look for solutions in the sphere of national security. An essential form of strengthening military friendship among different countries was introduced in the International Army Games. This is a competition of tank crews, pilots, sailors, paratroopers, gunners, divers, logistic officers, military engineers, K9 trainers, cooks, rescuers, and other competitions. This is a major sports event that determined the new trends in international military cooperation. It changed the very concept of operational training and discovered a new scope of opportunity of defense cooperation. The next Army Games will place August 3 to August 17 this year, and I invited everybody without any exception. Dear colleagues, every time before we start searching for new patterns of defense cooperation in the region, we must think about the foundation these patterns should be built upon. We already have a solid basis to build on our interaction upon the long-standing, time-tested, and well-developed network of political, trade, economic, and humanitarian ties within ASEAN and dialogue partners, along with broad transcontinental corridor across Eurasia, including Eurasian Economic Union, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Russian Defense Ministry welcomed the effort of ASEAN member states to promote interaction with partners. For our part, we are ready to contribute to the architecture of equal and individual security that meets the interests of all the states in the region. Security for all and for everyone based on mutual beneficial cooperation and equal partnership. Thank you for your attention.
Minister, thank you very much for your presentation. I think I can imagine we will want to debate the argument you've made regarding how national interest relates to different forms of cooperation and the legitimacy or lack thereof that comes from those different formats, as you mentioned. I'd like to thank you also for mentioning and explaining some of the examples of what the Russian Ministry of Defense considers useful and productive forms of defense cooperation, and I'm sure we will want to build on that as well. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Air Chief Marshal Sir Stuart Peach, Chairman of NATO's Military Committee, to give us his view on the issue. Air Chief Marshal.
Vielen Dank, Bastian. Ministers, Excellencies, good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation from IISS to speak, and thank you, of course, to our friends and hosts from Singapore. Despite the changing threat and other circumstances, NATO remains the strongest military alliance in history. Bound by our shared history, values and goals, we contribute both to European and international peace and security. Throughout our 7 decades, and it's our 70th anniversary this year, we have consistently proven our capability to adapt both to new challenges and threats, and our process of adaptation, I think, speaks for itself. We have evolved into an alliance that ensures both our members' states and security, collective defense, but we also cooperate with many other states to improve their and the region's security. We contribute to conflict resolution, and more importantly, in the world we're in, we contribute to stability worldwide through capacity building, training and support, which is based on our shared values and experience. Our success is based on the bond between our allies, and that bond represents trust, based on a treaty and our commitment to each other, which we practice every day. The threats we face are not localized to our area of responsibility and are becoming more frequent, more complex and more dangerous. And of course, something that happens in one region can instantly affect another. Borders are crossed with impunity. So we in NATO believe in maintaining a broad security network. And that includes political dialogue and practical cooperation. Over the last 25 years, the Alliance has created 41 partnerships in the Euro-Atlantic area and in this region. Our partnerships in this region include countries such as Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and Mongolia, and we work together in different ways, in different formats. And as we have adapted and evolved, so have our partnerships. Today, we embrace flexible instruments, new forms of cooperation and consultation. Like-minded partners who share the same values and share the same challenges. Through dialogue and cooperation, therefore, we don't just defend territory, we defend the values to ensure the security of our allies and our partners. And that is our contribution to international peace and security. Our aim has remained the same throughout the 7 decades, to preserve and secure international peace and security. So what does this mean? In summary, it means we build on lessons learned together with our partners. We're open to new ideas and members and partners. We adapt our organization, our training, our exercises, our equipment and our practices to current threats and new threats. But at the same time, we stand united, we share values and work together and learn from each other to ensure peace and security. And therefore, our offer is simple. Wherever we are in the world, we wish to continue to cooperate, to understand each other, and to work together. Thank you.
Chief Marshal, thank you very much. I think that was a model in terms of clarity and brevity, and thank you very much for that. I think you made a very important point when you said NATO continues to adapt because it adjusts to its environment, but its aims remain unchanged in despite of this adaptation. And I think it will be interesting in the discussion for people to perhaps debate with you how you see NATO's role in this region and what that offer that you made and that you expressed translates into in terms of activity here in that region. So I'm looking forward to that. And with that, I'll hand over to General Angus Campbell, who is the Chief of the Defence Force of Australia. Sir, please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and my fellow panellists. Let me start by thanking IISS and the Government of Singapore for hosting this event, and Minister Ong for his warm hospitality. For Australia, the Indo-Pacific is our neighbourhood and our community. Australia seeks an Indo-Pacific that is stable and prosperous, where disputes are resolved peacefully, where global powers are constructive, where institutions and norms are strengthened, and where open markets allow all nations to benefit from economic growth and trade. We seek an Indo-Pacific with ASEAN at its heart, in which the US is deeply engaged and where China plays its part to strengthen regional order. We're also clear about what we do not want. Australia does not want the stability underpinning our region's growing prosperity to be disrupted. We do not want states undermining the rules-based order, creating uncertainty and unpredictability. We do not want might to triumph over right. For those who share our concerns about stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific, as I expect everyone here does, there are steps we can take. We must do more to strengthen institutions, promote openness and work together. And we need to step up our individual and combined contributions to regional stability. For Australia, this is one of our highest defence and security priorities. Right now, we are deepening our engagement and partnership with our neighbours. I'll offer 4 examples which are indicative and might be further explored in question time. Together with New Zealand, Australia is helping to develop the Black Rock Centre in Fiji into a regional hub for peacekeeping and police training and pre-deployment preparation, a hub that will be owned and operated by Fiji for best practice in peacekeeping. Across our neighbourhood, Australia's Pacific Maritime Security Program will see 21 Guardian-class patrol boats gifted to 12 Pacific Island nations and Timor-Leste, combined with enhanced aerial surveillance and information fusion for the maritime security of the Southwest Pacific community. Australia's ongoing contribution to humanitarian assistance and disaster relief efforts with many other countries in our region throughout the Indo-Pacific is a contribution we're proud of, we encourage others to step into, and we have been making in this region for a century, from our first mission in 1919. And finally, our annual Indo-Pacific Endeavour Multilateral Maritime Security Activity is a new initiative helping to build new relationships and habits of cooperation. These examples build on Australia's history and relationships in the region. But what should be stressed is the manner of the engagement. Australia sees itself as a partner in our efforts, not an instructor, not an owner, not a director. We seek to assist, to help and support our neighbours in ways they desire and recognise them as valued international partners in their own right. That matters, and I encourage everyone to remember that. It is the manner of how we all engage, the patterns of cooperation we display, the trust we create. These are as important as the outcomes we achieve together. Thank you. I look forward to our discussion.
General, thank you very much for your remarks. I thank you for highlighting both the form and the function of cooperation through the specific examples that you have given, and that will, I'm sure, be picked up by the audience. Like the Air Chief Marshal, you mentioned the word trust as one of the underpinning principles here in the region and elsewhere. And that, of course, has come up throughout the dialogue already. So I'm sure that will be picked up as well. I'd like now to turn the floor over to General Koji Yamazaki, who is the Chief of Staff, Joint Staff of the Japan Self-Defense Forces. General, the floor is yours.
Okay, Excellencies, Ambassadors, Generals, Admirals, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon. And thank you very much, the entire team of IISS, the government of Singapore, for having me here. It is a privilege to participate in this year's Shangri-La Dialogue as the Chief of Staff, Japan Joint Chief. The theme of this session is new patterns of security and cooperation. Let me start off with the trends of the Indo-Pacific region security environment. Although interdependence among our countries has been increasingly growing and deepening, and changes in the balance of power in the international arena are accelerating and becoming more complex, and uncertainty over the existing order is increasing due to some concerns such as coercive attempts to alter the status quo. In the international community, these circumstances brought up a shared security agenda, and there is a broadening and diversifying array of security challenges that cannot be dealt with by a single country alone. Based on the given security environment, Japan has been vigorously promoting activities throughout the Indo-Pacific to contribute to stability of the region and the international community, in line with the perspective of proactive contribution to peace advocated by Prime Minister Abe, and the vision of the free and open Indo-Pacific. Now, so new patterns of security cooperation. The first, it is a UN project for rapid deployment of Endeavour capabilities, RDEC. RDEC is a project to fill the gap of capabilities among UN peacekeeping operation troop contributors, and Japan has been providing training program to countries in Africa, Asia, and its surrounding region since 2015 as a supporting UN member state. What makes the project now new is a triangular partnership which allows UN and the supporting UN member states collaboratively train troop contributing countries' personnel. A total of 125 Japan Safety Forces personnel have been dispatched as instructors to conduct heavy engineering equipment operation training for a total of 211 engineers of African troop contributing countries. We also conducted a pilot training program in Vietnam to expand the project to Asia and its surrounding area. Next is about capacity building assistance to Asian countries. The JSDF emphasizes capacity building assistance considering the importance of enabling each country to be able to contribute to the improvement of the security environment of its own initiative. The third item is the concrete measure to put into proactive practice the free and open Indo-Pacific. In addition to the efforts mentioned so far, besides the capacity building assistance, we also engage in multilateral joint training and exercises, international disaster relief operation, PKOs, and counter-piracy operations. I am confident that by accumulating various multilateral cooperation frameworks, we can generate synergy and amplify the overall efforts so that we will be able to contribute to peace and stability in Indo-Pacific, the region. Lastly, it is regarding to multilateral cooperation in monitoring and surveillance activities against illicit ship-to-ship transfer by North Korea. As for the issue of North Korea's nuclear and missile program, Pyongyang has indicated its intention to completely denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. However, their activities are inconsistent with the dismantlement of all weapons of mass destruction, such mass destructions and every single ballistic missile of all ranges in a complete, verifiable, and irreversible manners. And so far, there has been no fundamental change in North Korea's nuclear and missile capabilities. And under such circumstances, aiming to enhance the effective implementation of the relevant United Nations Security Council resolution on North Korea, and consequently contribute to peace and stability of the region, we have been monitoring against illegal goods transportation among vessels, including the North Korea flag vessels, so-called ship-to-ship transfer. What is particularly encouraging is that the partner countries are increasingly working together to enhance this multilateral surveillance approach against ship-to-ship transfer. This includes not only Pacific Ocean littoral countries such as the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, but also the European countries such as the UK and France. Such multilateral framework making a significant contribution to improving the effectiveness of UN Security Council resolutions. JSDF conducts warning and surveillance activities in conjunction with sending states. This cooperation and initiative can be said as a new pattern of security cooperation. In addition to these efforts, international cooperation is essential to strengthen the enforcement against activities attempting to sneak out of sanctions. In this regard, as countries which have significant influence on North Korea, China, and Russia, as well as the Southeast Asian countries located at critical junction of the global transportation route along the coast, are extremely important. The key to success is how we will obtain the commitment of concerned countries. In the meantime, the accumulation and the combination of concerned countries' cooperation are necessary in the immediate form of security cooperation. In conclusion, aim of the broadening and diversifying a series of difficult security challenges, it is becoming increasingly critical to continuously maintain and strengthen the free and open international order based on the rule of law. In cooperation with each country, we will promote contributions for the stability of the regional and international communities. Thank you very much.
General, thank you. Thank you very much for outlining the need for these proactive contributions and for explaining Japan's role in providing those yourself, but also encouraging others to join you in that effort. And also thank you for highlighting the issue of capacity building, which has been mentioned by previous speakers as well, and it's a bit of one of the threats that are emerging in this conversation. Thank you very much for that. I'd like to now invite Major General Qi Guoai,
接下来有请次国威将
military cooperation at the Central Military Commission of China to deliver his remarks. I believe the General will be speaking in Mandarin, so we should have translation available.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. And ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am Major General Zi Guowei, Chief of the Office for International Military Cooperation of the Ministry of National Defense of China. The world today is undergoing profound changes unseen in a century. Peace and development remain the core of our times. People across the world are becoming members of a community of shared destiny with their interests and security intertwined. Chinese President Xi Jinping put forth the great vision of building new type major country relations and a community with a shared future. The pursuit of peace, stability, and development has become the universal aspiration of the international community. The force for peace grows much faster than the factors for war. However, hegemony, power politics, and unilateralism flare up from time to time, exerting impact to the international security system and order. The Asia-Pacific region where we survive and thrive is home to many hotspots and sensitive issues. Challenges from discord for ethnic and religious reasons, terrorism, transnational crime, and major natural disasters, and risks in environmental, cyber, energy, and resource security are on a notable rise. Security issues are extending in both its implication and forms. Therefore, it is important to further extend military exchange and cooperation and explore new models of defense cooperation with a view to maintaining regional and international peace and stability. As for models of defense cooperation in the region, there are not only the US-led military alliances, but also organizations, for example, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, that adhere to the principle of non-alignment with open membership and multilateral mechanisms such as the ASEAN Regional Forum, the ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting Plus, the Shangri-La Dialogue, the Western Pacific Naval Symposium, and the Beijing Shanshan Forum. The Chinese side believes that no country can respond alone in face of the complex international security threats, nor can they resort to arms for all problems. We're bound. We think fight alone cannot work. The using of force cannot work. We should uphold common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security for all, and abandon the Cold War mentality and confrontation between military blocs. Aiming at win-win results, defense cooperation should be based on mutual respect and mutual trust. In this regard, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization provides a model which champions mutual trust, mutual benefit, equality, consultation, respect for diverse civilizations, and common development. Since 2001, when it was founded, the CIO has put in place a framework for defense and security cooperation structured by 1 meeting, 2 hallmark programs, and 1 support. Under the framework, member states carried out extensive cooperation in multiple fields, with the defense ministers meeting as a lead, the fanfare for peace military tattoo, and the peace mission counterterrorism joint exercise as showpieces, and functional exchanges as a substantive. By creating the CIO model, the organization offers another option for regional cooperation, which is a significant contribution to regional peace and development, and has received increasingly wide recognition of the international community. China is fully aware that its peaceful development is closely linked with the future of the Asia-Pacific. We advocate active bilateral and multilateral security dialogue and cooperation, and strive to facilitate regional cooperation in both economy and security. China adopts a holistic approach to security governance that addresses both the symptoms and root causes. China's proposals on the Asia-Pacific security architecture are meant to complete and improve the existing mechanisms rather than overturn them and start all over again. To this end, China proposed the following. First, we need to promote positive interaction between major countries for defense cooperation. Only when major country relations remain stable can the Asia-Pacific enjoy relative tranquility. The China-Russia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership of Coordination is running at a high level. The relationship and military-to-military relationship between China and the U.S. remain generally stable despite twists and difficulties. China adheres to the principles of non-conflict, non-confrontation, mutual respect, and win-win cooperation in China-U.S. relations. This is a decision made by us not only for developing the bilateral relations, but also for maintaining the security in the Asia-Pacific and the world. Healthy interaction between major countries requires joint efforts toward the same goal. It is also important for other countries to support and cooperate in this respect instead of fomenting dissension for their own immediate interests. Second, we need to build an open and inclusive architecture for defense cooperation. Military blocs left over from the Cold War are the choices of only a small number of countries and do not represent the preference of the majority of regional and international communities. The Cold War mentality, which differentiates adversaries from allies based on ideology, has long been outdated. Expanding military alliance under whatever pretext is not in line with the trends of the times. We have taken note the Indo-Pacific concept put forward by relevant country. China advocates that all initiatives newly proposed should be in favor of greater transparency and inclusiveness with wider participation and fit in the area of integrated global economy, political pluralism, and shared security. None should undermine the interests of others or developed into exclusive military blocs. Third, we need to enhance practical cooperation in non-traditional security. Compared with traditional security issues, non-traditional security is an area where countries have reached more consensus and carried out more joint engagements. Therefore, we should proceed from the lower-hanging fruits and continue our cooperation with non-traditional security as a priority for greater mutual trust. In recent years, through regular engagements in joint counterterrorism, peacekeeping, and HAD exercises and training, China has continued to extend practical cooperation with its neighboring countries, especially ASEAN. As the co-chairs of the ADMM plus EWG on counterterrorism, China and Thailand will respectively host a tabletop exchange and a field training exercise on counterterrorism this year. Our cooperation will not only stop at exchanges and exercises. The ultimate goal of defense cooperation is to enhance capabilities to meet challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, like air and sunshine, peace is something that we may take for granted but cannot live without. We cannot develop without peaceful environment. As we live in the same and only Earth village, it is imperative for us to recognize that we share a future. Riding on the trend of the times, China will proceed in the right direction by continuing to pursue its own security in the bigger context of maintaining security for all in the region and promoting cooperation with innovative security concepts so as to contribute to a bright future of the Asia-Pacific region, when the region can guide the development of the world, benefit all parties, and create better lives for future generations. Let's work together to build a community of shared future for mankind. Thank you. 谢谢。
For your remarks. You pointed out the particular responsibility that major countries have in promoting cooperation. You spoke about the opportunities that cooperation on non-traditional security challenges might hold in terms of building trust. I wonder whether there might be one or two people in the room who will pick up your characterization of military alliances as representing a certain logic of cooperation. And so I thank you for putting these arguments on the table, and I'm looking forward to the debate. Last but certainly not least, I'd now like to invite Senator Cory Gardner, Chairman of the Subcommittee on East Asia, the Pacific, and International Cybersecurity, the Committee on Foreign Relations in the U.S. Senate, to deliver his remarks. Senator, the Congress, Senate, House of Representatives were already mentioned as important actors in foreign and security policy, in the foreign and security policy arena here in this region by the U.S. Secretary of Defense. So we're all very much looking forward to your remarks. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you to ISS and, of course, Singapore for this incredible opportunity to come together as a group of nations to discuss our most important security issues. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in today's discussion as well. I'm proud to represent the United States on today's panel, in particular the United States Congress, which is, of course, a co-equal branch of government in our political system. I'm joined by a number of my colleagues from the House and Senate here at the Dialogue, along with our highest-ranking defense leadership. Under our Constitution, it is Congress that holds the power of the purse and writes the laws for the executive branch to implement the democratic will of the American people. Last year, I spoke at this event about one such legislative effort called ARIA, or the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act, which has now been signed into law by the President. ARIA is a generational approach to Asia and a bipartisan, bicameral acknowledgement of the importance of Asia power. ARIA reaffirmed the United States' commitment to our allies and partners in this region and provided a blueprint for the future United States policy in the Indo-Pacific, including providing additional resources to boost cooperative security efforts in the region, such as maritime domain awareness, counterterrorism efforts, humanitarian assistance, and disaster relief. The legislation propounds upon three key elements of U.S. policy: security cooperation, economic engagement, and a firm commitment to advance the fundamental values of human rights and the rule of law in the Indo-Pacific. As such, ARIA incorporates and elaborates on the administration's Indo-Pacific strategy, the defining element of which is the enduring United States commitment to uphold international law to maintain an Indo-Pacific that is free of coercion, military, economic, or in violation of basic human rights and freedoms. ARIA is about sovereignty and the respect for international law, norms, and partnerships. ARIA delivers defense cooperation without threatening others or diminishing their sovereignty. ARIA has codified this vision of the free and Indo-Pacific into U.S. law. Other U.S. leaders present at the Shangri-La Dialogue today, most prominently Acting Secretary of Defense Shanahan, extrapolated on this important vision today. And we've all talked and recognized the keystone of ASEAN. I'm here to testify that the United States Congress fully support the free and Indo-Pacific, as evident by the unanimous passage of ARIA and other efforts this year, this Congress, in support of our allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific. The United States has always been and will always remain a Pacific nation and power. We're also a nation that seeks peaceful coexistence, respecting sovereignty and law, but will never hesitate to protect our allies and our vital national security interests with every diplomatic, economic, and, if necessary, military tool. We do so in defense of the fundamental order, rooted in international norms and values that help the rise of the United States, and with that rise, the rise of many other nations around the globe. The United States will defend the international order because that order benefits all nations in this region. The Indo-Pacific is home to 5 United States Security Treaty allies. The Indo-Pacific is home to nearly half of the world's population and half of the world's economic activity. There is no conceivable scenario where the United States will be boxed out of this region. The United States is here to stay because we are a Pacific nation, grounded in the rule of law, dedicated to global peace, prosperity, and security. We will spare no effort to uphold the peaceful, liberal global order that has benefited all nations in this region. At the end of the Second World War, aboard the USS Missouri, it was said, "It is my earnest hope, and indeed the hope of all mankind, that from this solemn occasion a better world shall emerge out of the blood and carnage of the past. A world founded upon faith and understanding. A world dedicated to the dignity of man and the fulfillment of his most cherished wish for freedom, tolerance, and justice." Thank you for having me today.
Senator, thank you very much for these remarks. Thank you for that message of engagement that you bring and that your presence symbolizes, and as does the presence of your colleagues from both houses in Congress. And I think it is very interesting to see how legislative action translates into practical cooperation here in the region and elsewhere. So thank you for mentioning that and giving us some examples of how this works. Our speakers have been very disciplined, which gives us a good 43 minutes for conversation and debate now. And I'd like to invite you to ask questions, make comments on what you have heard. If you're sitting behind a microphone, please insert your name badge, chip down into the slot on the right hand of that panel. Doing so has 2 advantages. I can see who you are, and you can actually activate your microphone, so that helps. We will group perhaps a few contributions, a few comments together to get our debate going. So who would like to go first? And William, please. Yes, William Chong.
Thank you, Bastian. My question is to Minister Fomin. I take note of your very punchy comments about the free and open Indo-Pacific concept being a quote-unquote artificial product and counterproductive in undermining ASEAN centrality. I find that curious, to say the least, because whether you agree with the term or not, the Indo-Pacific term has been used very widely. It's used by your 4 fellow panelists today from Australia, from China, from Japan, from the United States. China, of course, has reservations about the concept. Major General Xi Guowei says that, as long as it doesn't undermine the interests of others, and he uses the term. Nonetheless, ASEAN uses the term, although ASEAN has a different interpretation of what Indo-Pacific concept should be. So my question to you is, Acting Secretary of Defense said that, whether you use the Indo-Pacific term or not, there are universal principles here: respect for sovereignty, peaceful resolution of disputes, free and fair trade, and adherence to rules and norms. Can I ask, what does Russia think about such supposedly universal norms and values? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, William. Douglas Greenlaw.
Yes, Senator Gardner, those of us with an interest in the region, thank you for your leadership and sponsorship of the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act, ARIA. I noted Secretary Shanahan's remarks this morning highlighted the great support of Congress in the budget process, providing funding for the National Defense Strategy. Do you believe the U.S. Congress is committed to the long-term funding necessary to implement that strategy?
Douglas, thank you very much. Anybody else would like to seek the floor? Yes, please, Mr. Gabuev.
Alex Gabuev with the Carnegie Endowment, and my question goes to General Peach. We see some members of the alliance coming more frequently and doing FONAP operations in the South China Sea. And we've seen a reverse movement where China is coming to the European theater and doing some military exercise, naval exercise, particularly with Russia in the Sea of Baltic. So what do you make of that? Is the alliance watching? What's the reaction of the alliance? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that question. I'll take one more on this round, and then I'll hand it back to the panel. Yes, sir. Can't quite see your name, but yes, sir.
Thanks. Just two quick questions. One for Mr. Peach. You mentioned flexible forms of alignment that NATO has been considering and is continuing to consider. I'm wondering if you could offer some specific examples of that and how it affects the Asian security environment. One example that comes quickly to mind is Partnership for Peace, which has grown to include Japan and also Australia and South Korea. But I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about what are the more flexible arrangements that could be made with Southeast Asian states. Because I know there are some informal conversations that are going on about engagement, but nothing formalized to my knowledge at least. So what might be the prospects there? And then for Mr. Xi, from the Chinese perspective, I'm curious about the notion that China is willing to improve on the existing security architecture and not overturn it, which I get and I understand, it's been restated many times. But then also this notion that Cold War alliances will not be accepted or is not part of China's security thinking. I'm curious about that because it seems to be a little bit outdated considering Chinese security practice. Because if I look at what China is doing with respect to its own partnerships, China is forming active partnerships with former and current US allies, including Thailand and the Philippines. And so there is a tendency to Chinese security practice to take into account that these are alliances of the United States, but China is still willing to work with them in practice. So my question for you is, how does China reconcile the rhetoric about Cold War alliances being outdated with the contemporary reality of having to work with countries that are allies in this new and very changing and fluid security environment?
Thank you very much. I'd like to go back to the panel now to engage with those questions. So I'm going to ask Minister Foreman to react to the point that William made about the free and open Indo-Pacific and the criticism that you have voiced, Minister, and perhaps explain what the objections are and how far they relate to terms versus principles, and so on and so forth. I'd like to then ask Air Chief Marshal to engage with the questions that were put in his direction. In particular, how do you see China's activities in the Euro-Atlantic realm, of which there are more and more visible ones, and then also how these flexible partnerships, and PFP was mentioned as a particular one, work and what they deliver. And then I'd also like to ask General Xi to address the point that was made about reconciling China's approach to alliances and partnerships with its foreign policy positioning. So maybe we'll deal with those set of issues first before we then turn to the audience and the group again for more input and further questions. So, but first I'd like to ask Minister Foreman to give us his response. Minister.
My dear colleagues, I will speak in Russian. Please take your audio sets and adjust. Коллеги, мы говорим о том, что уже, точнее, уважаемый коллега сказал о том, что уже существует такой некий термин, устоявшийся, обозначающий Индо-Тихоокеанский регион, свободный открытый Индо-Тихоокеанский регион. Я с этим не очень согласен.
Yes, gentlemen. When we speak about the term Indo-Pacific or Indo-Pacific free and open, I don't quite agree that this is a term which is widely used today. In fact, we believe that there is a lack of common understanding geopolitically, geographically, and militarily what Indo-Pacific stands for. First. Secondly, we believe that major parts, maybe half of the countries in the region have not been invited into this format of engagements. I'm talking about nations in the Western Pacific, Eastern Africa, and so on. We believe that this is not yet an all-regional product. We truly believe that this is just a matter of separate strategies of individual states. And this would be inappropriate to put an equal sign between these new strategies and the decades of perceptions and orders and rules that have been once established in the Asia Pacific and are still effectively upheld today. And we are quite confident that all the new ideas regarding the new arrangements in this region should take us closer to strengthening our cooperation, all-round improvement of the entire system of relations that has been long time introduced in this region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. At the end of this round, I will give, if they want to, give General Campbell and General Yamasaki an opportunity to react on the specific point on the free and open Indo-Pacific. If you'd like to, you don't have to, but I'll just offer it at the end of this round if you'd like to engage. Air Chief Marshal.
Thank you, and thank you for the questions. NATO as an alliance takes no position on territorial disputes or disagreements between sovereign states anywhere, but what NATO does, and has throughout its history, is uphold the principle of customary international law for the freedom of navigation. And when other nations choose to move into other waters, we expect that same principle to be upheld. In terms of partnership, it is a very good question. And it takes many forms, and it takes nations at the pace of their sovereign requirements and their wishes to engage with us. So, for example, some of our partners have worked with us on operations, and their experience of working with us has led them to seek a partnership which has lasted beyond the mission. And we respect that. And it could be the bonds formed on operations that then turn into a training experience, which becomes a shared values, and it develops from the bottom, from the tactical upwards. But the thing I would offer in those 7 decades of our existence is that NATO has a lot of experience. And we have world-level, world-class training centers and education places for military education, which ranges from everything from support to operations through to military medicine and support to various types of peacekeeping. And so the final thought I'd offer is, what does the alliance bring which is different? It's that convening authority through our experience.
Thank you very much, Air Chief Marshal. General T, if I could ask you to react to that point that was made, that there might be a contradiction in the thinking, in China's thinking about alliances. I was wondering whether you see that contradiction or whether you disagree with the statement. General, please, if you could give us your response.
Thank you. I think first, in my speech, I stated my perspective on the whole world instead of on a specific issue. Just now, I think you raised this question. I think we have different ideas about this world. In Chinese view, we think it is a global village. It is big, it is also small. For China, we follows an independent foreign policy of peace, and we stays on the peaceful development road, and we adopt a defensive defense policy. Under this backdrop, we uphold open, positive cooperation with all countries, no matter big or small countries. and we think they're all equal. So in my speech, I say that mutual respect is precondition, and mutual trust is also an important foundation. So, on your question about the alliance or non-alliance, I think these are two different ideas. China follows independent foreign policy of non-alliance, but it does not affect China's cooperation with other countries, including countries that have already built military alliances with other countries. Thank you.
I forgot, of course, the very good question that Douglas Greenlaw asked, and I'd like to invite Senator Gardner to react to it, and specifically the point of the long-term commitment and the ability and willingness of Congress to support that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this goes to the heart of U.S. engagement in Asia, and really the efforts that have taken place last Congress as well as this Congress. We've already seen success at the appropriations level through some of the funding that's gone through the democracy, human rights, rule of law programs. The law was signed into effect at the end of the year, New Year's Eve, so we kind of missed out on an appropriations cycle, and we'll have to catch up next year as we get the full year appropriations in. But it goes to the broader question of long-term commitment and generational commitment to the Indo-Pacific. Every administration can bring its own strategy or policy to a region, whether that's the pivot, the rebalance, look east, look west, whatever they want to call it. But only Congress creates the long-term law that directs the administration. That's exactly what we have done through consecutive Defense Authorization Acts, appropriations bills, the Asia Reassurance Act, as well as the BUILD Act, and a number of other legislative matters dealing with our approach to a free and open Indo-Pacific. And so if we are going to have a permanent presence, which we must have and will have, and we must increase that engagement and presence, only Congress, through successful legislative efforts, can get that done.
Senator, thank you very much. General Yamasaki, I was wondering, you used the term free and open Indo-Pacific and explained how central you think it is. So I was wondering whether you had a reaction to the discussion so far on that particular point.
Thank you very much. Please allow me to speak in Japanese here. Yes, we have the strategy of free and open Indo-Pacific because for global peace and prosperity, of course, each country should adhere to international norms and act in accordance. Each country should, of course, act in their own national interest, but their action or behavior should be appropriate and should be secured, should be reassuring, and should be safe. And the action based on international law and the law and norm in this part of the world is very important. And with that in mind, we have been carrying out various activities, and each country in the parts of this region should also conduct their actions and programs. Thank you.
General, thank you very much. General Campbell.
I appreciate that each nation represented here may have a either differing perspective on a particular term or indeed differing terms. Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific. What does Asia-Pacific mean? What does Indo-Pacific mean? I don't offer you an answer, I'll just offer you a perspective. And I think it is a perspective subject to whether my worldview is maritime or continental. I live on an island surrounded by three great oceans of this planet. The wealth, prosperity, and opportunity of my country is utterly dependent on maritime trade, on the laws of the sea, on the peaceful, open opportunities for trade and engagement across the globe. I suspect this is also true for the great wealth of the partners we trade with, who are also in that connected region in which we live. And that's why Australia has chosen to describe the strategic context as the Indo-Pacific, and to think from that perspective as to how we understand, how we build and strategically interpret, and how we act in our world from our worldview. Thank you.
General, thank you very much. I'd like to invite more questions and comments now. Do we have a roving microphone as well here available? Yes? Okay, so just to mention, even if you're not sitting behind one of these fancy microphones here, you can, of course, contribute to the debate and the discussion. We have roving microphones that will come to you, and I will want one of those over there on this side of the room, please. If you can get a microphone over there, lady in the second row, yes. And if you could briefly introduce yourself before you make your statement, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you. Alice Ekman from the French Institute of International Relations, IFRI in Paris. I have a question to Major General Tse. Major General, thank you very much for your comprehensive presentation. I think your point was very clear about China's rejection of the alliance system, or at least China is not happy with the alliance architecture. This is actually not new, because already under Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai, China was not embracing the concept of alliance. So my question is, from a comparative perspective, to what extent today's China's opposition towards the alliance system is different from Mao era? To what extent it is in line or not in line with what we could say the spirit of the Bandung Conference of 1955 and the non-alignment positioning of China? To what extent it is aligned or non-aligned with the five principle of peaceful coexistence? So basically, to what extent China's opposition to the alliance system today is different from Mao's era opposition? Thank you very much, Major General Tse.
Thank you very much. There was another question. Yes, please, sir. And then if you, both of you, yes.
Thank you very much. My question goes to Senator Gardner. Your comments about reassuring of a U.S. commitment being well taken, but however, with the Trump administration trying to link trade disputes and national security issue, especially with labeling of auto import as potential national security threat, how can you alleviate concerns amongst the allies that the U.S. commitment and the extended deterrence might come with a high price tag?
Thank you very much. And yes, please, the lady right next. Yes.
So my question is to all of the panelists. So we have seen disagreement in this panel, despite we are talking about new patterns of defense cooperation. So I think the gist is that we have different sets of rules of law. You have freedom of navigation and a disagreement over it, Indo-Pacific or Asia-Pacific. And also we have different sets of alliances or alignments. So on the one side, you have China-Russia alignment, and I find it interesting, both Chinese and also Russian representatives talk about Shanghai Cooperation and other regional institutions that they were part of, and also on the other side, US alliances. And in the middle, because there is no ASEAN representative here, so it has not been much been talked about. But given how all of the speakers in Shangri-La Dialogue have mentioned ASEAN centrality is not to be undermined, shouldn't we build security architecture based on the existing platform and find a common ground? And since ASEAN can accommodate most of the major powers, do you think that is the way forward? And that would echo our earlier session today on Asia's evolving security order. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll invite one more comment, Mr. Zhang.
Hello, I'm from China.
中国
Mr. Gardner, maybe from your personal perspective as a lawmaker, do you think there is a contradiction between, say, a idea of open and free sea link with a trade protectionism maybe adopted at the same time by the same country, or as we understand? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I will do the following. We'll ask. I'll ask the panelists who had questions specifically put to them individually to go first, and then I will invite the others to join in on the point that was made, in particular about whether the existing framework can deliver the basis for common ground, if I'm slightly rephrase what you said, or I suppose the flip side of your question is, or do we need something else to deal with the differences that have become apparent during the discussion so far. So I'd like to actually, but those who I will call on first, please also do engage with that question. I'd like to start with Senator Gardner actually, and ask you to pick up on that particular question, but also on the two arguments that were put to you regarding the perceived tension by some in the room between, perhaps different voices within the administration, but also perhaps some of the principles that are being put forward as administration policy at this point. Senator, please.
Thank you again. And I think, again, reassurance is an incredibly important part of the effort Congress has undertaken. And I think if you look at the bipartisan nature of our efforts over the last Congress, it really is quite compelling. There are very few areas where we have seen the bipartisan support that we have in our work toward Asia, the BUILD Act, ARIA, and other legislative efforts. So you have this bipartisan, bicameral approach that is critical to that free and open Indo-Pacific. Now, as it relates to U.S. deterrence, I think Secretary Pompeo has made it very clear to the Philippines, for instance, with our defense treaty, that we fully are committed to the defense treaty. There was a statement made, I believe it was in March of this year, Article 4, concerning Article 4. If you look at our commitment through Congress, I think that goes to the heart of what I was saying earlier, that administrations come and go, executive orders come and go, executive agreements come and go, but Congress enacts the laws that stay until Congress acts to repeal them. And that's the importance of the Asia policies moving forward right now, is these are a congressional adoption of the national defense strategy, congressional adoption of the national security strategy that is being enacted into law that cannot be reversed by a future president. Congress should also, I think, reassert its authority and power under certain tariff actions that have been taken. I disagree with the tariffs, but I do think the tariffs have been based in legitimate concerns over the theft of intellectual property, forced joint venture ownership, the transfer of technology, state-owned enterprise, unfair competition, as well as forced board membership on corporations. I don't think tariffs were the right direction, but I do think there is a significant grievance that not just the United States has faced, but many nations around the globe have faced when it comes to fair trade and international norms of fair trade. So those need to be addressed. I do think Congress is the appropriate role. I do think Congress entering into the Trans-Pacific Partnership would have been a much better approach, one that I continue to support today.
Senator, thank you very much. Any thoughts on the existing framework as being the place to find the common ground? Any additions to that?
The existing framework of, I'm sorry?
The existing frameworks of cooperation as being able to bring these different perspectives together and therefore offer a chance to find common
Look, there are always new avenues to improve on existing frameworks, or perhaps new avenues of existing frameworks, but when it comes to the engagement of those nations interested in free and open dialogue, as well as the cooperation partners and allies that we seek, I think existing frameworks work. Should there be a NATO-type structure, perhaps in Asia? That's something that people ought to look at.
Thank you, Senator. I'd like to now turn to General Xie and ask him to react to the question that was put to him and say a few words about the evolution of China's thinking on alliances and then how far the arguments he has made indeed stand in that tradition and therefore are an evolution, or whether there's a more subtle shift in that position. And please, General, while you have the floor, also give us your reaction to the question that we heard on the existing institutional and cooperation frameworks and their ability to develop common grounds around some of the different perspectives that we heard. General, please, floor is yours.
Thank you. The lady from France just raised a question on China's foreign policy and the idea of an alliance and whether there are changes in China's policies. I want to say that from the 1950s, the Bandung meeting, and through all the years, and in the 1950s was in the era of Chairman Mao Zedong. After the 18th National People's Congress, under the leadership of President Xi Jinping, we have now entered a new era with Chinese characteristics. However, China still stays on the peaceful development road, and we have never changed our policy of non-alliance. The contents of our policy have evolved. Now we advocate common, comprehensive, sustainable security. We have written it into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization papers, and in its spirit, we advocate non-conflict and no target against a third party. Instead, we hope to strengthen common development through mutual respect and the respect for diversity. It is, I think, the SAO member states as well as the Asia-Pacific region, and even in the world, we want to achieve common prosperity and common development in the world. This is my answer to your question. Just now, many talked about a existing cooperation model or new model. And since our subject is new model of defense cooperation, that is why in my speech I say that no model can solve all problems. We need to innovate, and by the end of my speech I also say that we need to innovate models of cooperation. Some colleagues say that we are having the Shangri-La Dialogue in ASEAN, in Singapore, in an ASEAN country. Actually, I mentioned a lot of cooperation exchanges between China and ASEAN countries, as well as China and other Asia-Pacific countries. I think we should make joint efforts to build new platforms. One platform cannot serve all interests and cannot solve all problems. Therefore, we support the idea of creating new models of cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can invite General Yamasaki to also give us his view on this question of common ground, existing frameworks. Is that what we need? Do we need something else? Sir, please.
Earlier, amongst the there was a comment about the ASEAN is not represented in this meeting, and there seems to be a slight level of tension amongst the panelists. So as for this matter, so in this ASEAN region, I think this is a region that is impacted by the global powers, politically, economically, and military. We see prominent activities by global powers. And with regard to the Indo-Pacific region, it is still important that we contribute to the global peace and stability, and at the same time, that each country needs to pursue its own prosperity as well. So this free and open Indo-Pacific, I already made my remark about this concept, vision, and then, as I said, there are activities by global powers, and when they conduct their activities, it is very important to have rules and also order, and it has to be conducted in a manner it is in accordance with the norms of the international law. And so the countries need to find the right way to engage with this region, because we have this high-level purpose that each country would act with the rule of law so that we could achieve the global security and peace.
General Campbell.
What this region needs is trust. And we need to build it in words and in deeds, and consistently over time, using any and all modalities, old and new, ASEAN or non-ASEAN. But we shouldn't lose sight of what it is we're trying to achieve. And I think that ASEAN has as much a place in that as every other part of regional relationships and architecture. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Marshal.
Although the question was not addressed to me, and it's not appropriate for me to comment on your region, from an alliance perspective, NATO has evolved and adapted. And our original purpose, created through a treaty in 1949, created that unity of purpose. The unity of purpose has itself evolved to now embrace new partners who've been with us on operations and shared that sense of purpose. That enables, through shared values, a trust to build to the point where we can work together with many different partners.
Thank you, Chief Marshal. Minister Foreman, please.
Dank u. Totally, for everybody, for everyone, without any exception, and not prejudicing the interests of any one of states in the world. That is why. Thanks. I'm meaning impact 100% impacted target, you know. Just thank you for that suggestion.
Minister, thank you very much. We've got time for one last heartburn question, if there is one. Just looking around the room to invite you to seek the floor. I don't see anybody seeking the floor. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think we heard 6 very interesting perspectives on this complex setting of defense cooperation and the patterns in the region and beyond. I think, as has been remarked, we heard some differences, yes. That is good, that is okay, that's why we have dialogue. That is the purpose of a meeting like this. We don't, you know, if we all agree about everything, you know, we probably wouldn't need to meet like this. So I think it is good that these differences were put out into the open in a respectful way and in an engaged way, so that we can work on trust in words and in deeds, as the General said. I think that is a good message to take away. And I'd like to thank everybody for engaging in this conversation, for the contributions from the floor. I'd like to thank the interpreters who are here somewhere, even though I can't see them, but I'd like to thank you for helping us move along swiftly and smoothly through this session. And I'd like to, of course, thank our speakers who made this engaging, lively, and very interesting. We had 6 speakers. The ISS was initially a little bit worried about timekeeping, so some wise person decided that one German staff member in the ISS needs to chair the session to keep an eye on time. So it is my great pleasure to therefore give 4 minutes back to all of you before you go about your evening. But I'd like to invite you all to thank our speakers in the usual way. Thank you very much.